Florida's demonic chair calls people. Devil's Throne of Cassadaga, Chapter 1. Dusk over Salem. The fog hung heavy in the town of Salem. The sky, bathed in a twilight purple, lent an eerie hue to the gravestones that stood sentinel in the graveyard. Mortimer, a tall figure wrapped in a black overcoat, moved through the mist with a sense of purpose, tools in hand. His work as a mortician was a vocation, passed down through generations. The town knew him as a man of few words, his demeanor always calm, even in the face of death. This quietude was a cloak, shielding his sensitive nature. While the world saw a mortician, underneath lay a man attuned to the spiritual realm, a secret only he bore. This evening felt different. As he began his work on a recently deceased townsperson, a shadow seemed to crawl across the corpse's face. Dismissing it as a trick of the dim light, he continued. But a sensation of cold dread trickled down his spine, making him freeze. Glancing around, he tried to shake off the unease, attributing it to the chilling tales often told about Salem. But then, the cadaver's hand twitched. He leapt back, knocking over a tray of instruments. The clattering echoed eerily. The hand lay still again. Had he imagined it? Shaken, he decided to finish his work quickly. But as he stitched up the body, he felt as though something, was watching him. Every shadow in the room seemed deeper, every corner filled with menace. Suddenly, the room's temperature dropped. Breath visible, Mortimer turned to the body, but it remained lifeless. However, the mirror on the adjacent wall reflected something impossible, an ethereal figure standing behind him. Swallowing hard, Mortimer turned around. Nothing. Returning his gaze to the mirror, the figure was gone, but a whisper lingered in the air, words incomprehensible but the tone unmistakable, pleading. Gathering his tools, he fled the room, locking the door behind him. Outside, he took deep breaths, trying to calm himself. Salem was known for its haunted history, but Mortimer had never experienced anything firsthand. Once home, he prepared a hot drink, hoping to stave off the cold that had seeped into his bones. The drink, however, didn't warm him, nor did the fire burning in the hearth. Sleep seemed an escape, but it eluded him. When he finally dozed off, it was anything but peaceful. He dreamt of a chair, ornate and old, set against a backdrop of a fog-laden town that wasn't Salem. Surrounding it were shadowy figures, whispering the same incomprehensible plea he had heard earlier. Waking up in a cold sweat, dawn's first light streamed through his window. The dream's details began to fade but left behind an oppressive weight on his chest. He needed to understand the dream's significance. He decided to seek guidance. Salem had its fair share of mystics and spiritualists, remnants of a bygone era. Consulting them might offer some clarity. By noon, he found himself at the doorstep of Agatha, Salem's oldest living psychic. Her reputation was a mix of respect and skepticism. Some believed she had real power, while others dismissed her as a relic of Salem's theatrical past. Explaining his experiences, Mortimer awaited her insight. She listened intently, her eyes narrowing as he described the chair. When he finished, she took a deep breath and said, "The chair you dreamt of isn't from here. It's from Cassadaga. The Devil's Chair." She handed him a book, its pages yellowed with age. "This might guide you," she whispered. He left her abode, the weight of the book in his hand, its mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Dusk was falling again on Salem, but for Mortimer, a journey was just beginning, one that would take him from the graves of Salem to the spectral legends of Cassadaga. Chapter 2. Whispers of Cassadaga. The town of Salem was no stranger to whispers. Whispers of witches, of hauntings, of age-old curses. But for Mortimer, the whisper now was more than a mere word. It was an insistent beckoning. A calling from Cassadaga. The book Agatha had given him felt cold in his hands, its age evident in its cracked leather cover and the musty smell of its pages. Sitting at his desk, Mortimer began to read, and as he did, the world around him seemed to recede, leaving him and the history of Cassadaga. The Devil's Chair, as the lore went, was an old legend, its origins muddled with time. Some said it was the resting place of a powerful medium who had communed with the devil himself. Others believed it was a portal between realms. But all accounts converged on one point: it was a force of undeniable power and darkness. What caught Mortimer's attention most, however, was an old photograph inserted between the pages. A black and white image of the chair. It looked exactly as it had in his dream, a simple stone bench, but with a foreboding aura. Staring at it, he felt an odd sensation, as if he was being pulled towards it. He blinked, shaking his head to clear the feeling. Beneath the photo was a handwritten note: "Beware the chair's allure. Its call is not for the faint of heart. Those who seek its mysteries risk everything." Mortimer's hands trembled slightly. The note's warning resonated with his own feelings. But why was he, a mortician from Salem, being drawn to this chair in Cassadaga? The next few pages detailed rituals and seances that had taken place around the chair. Mediums and spiritualists had been drawn to it, attempting to harness its power or unravel its mysteries. Many reported bizarre occurrences: visions of the dead, voices from beyond, and a few even disappeared, never to be seen again. His skepticism battled with his growing fear and curiosity. But as the night wore on, Mortimer's experiences, the visions, the cold, the dream, all seemed to point him in one direction: Cassadaga. Morning came with a decision. He would travel to Cassadaga. He needed answers, not just for his peace of mind, but perhaps for his very soul. He had a foreboding feeling that if he ignored this calling, it might consume him. As he made preparations, he couldn't shake off an eerie feeling of being watched. The town, with its cobblestone streets and historic buildings, felt different. The shadows seemed deeper, the silences more pronounced. Before departing, he paid another visit to Agatha. He found her in a trance, surrounded by lit candles. The room was thick with the scent of burning sage. She seemed to be expecting him. "You've decided to go," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Yes," Mortimer replied, hesitating. I feel like I must." Agatha looked deep into his eyes. "The chair has chosen you, but for what, I cannot see. Be wary, Mortimer. Cassadaga is a place of power, but also of darkness." She handed him a small pouch, its contents a mystery. "For protection," she whispered. "Use it when the time is right." The journey to Cassadaga was a blur. The closer he got, the stronger the pull he felt. Upon arrival, the town seemed quiet, even serene. But beneath its tranquility, Mortimer felt an undercurrent of energy. The locals looked at him with a mix of curiosity and pity. It seemed they recognized why he was there, even if he himself didn't fully understand. He overheard whispers, another one drawn to the chair. That evening, Mortimer stood before the Devil's Chair. The sun was setting, casting the area in a reddish glow. It was just a stone bench, yet the weight of its history and the tale surrounding it gave it an imposing presence. Hesitating only a moment, Mortimer sat. The world changed. Night and day blended. Shadows danced, and whispers grew into voices. Visions flooded his mind. Spirits in torment, dark rituals, and an ever-present force, malevolent and hungry. And then, silence. Mortimer found himself still seated on the chair, but the aura had changed. He felt a heaviness within him, a presence. It whispered promises of power and knowledge, but at a price. Stumbling to his feet, he realized the truth. The chair hadn't just called him, it had claimed him. The serene town of Cassadaga now held a prisoner, and as the darkness deepened, Mortimer wondered if he would ever find his way back to the world he knew, or if he was forever bound to the mysteries of the Devil's Chair. Chapter 3. The Council of Cassadaga. Morning in Cassadaga broke with an unusual chill. Birds that typically heralded dawn were curiously silent, and the sun, though it painted the sky with its golden hues, seemed reluctant to shine its warmth onto the town. Mortimer awoke in an unfamiliar bed, the events of the previous night flooding back in fragmented memories. He sat up, attempting to gather his thoughts, when a gentle knock interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he called out, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with silver hair tied into a neat bun. Her piercing blue eyes regarded him with a mix of concern and curiosity. "You're awake," she observed. "After what happened at the chair last night, I wasn't sure when you'd come around." Mortimer, trying to place her, finally recalled a fleeting memory of strong hands lifting him from the stone bench, her face filled with urgent concern. "I'm Eleanor," she introduced, one of Cassadaga's senior mediums. "You, young man, have stirred up quite a commotion." Mortimer felt a pang of anxiety. "The chair. What happened?" Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The Devil's Chair is an entity in itself. It's said to be a portal, a bridge between realms. Last night, when you sat on it, there was a surge of energy, the likes of which we haven't seen in years. It seemed to resonate with you." "I felt it take something from me," Mortimer admitted, shuddering at the recollection. She nodded. "And in return, it gave you something. A part of itself, perhaps." Mortimer remembered the feeling of a presence, a heavy darkness within him. "How do I get rid of it?" he pleaded. Eleanor sighed deeply. "I wish I had an easy answer. But first, we need to understand the nature of what's inside you. Cassadaga has a council of the most skilled psychics and mediums. They've dealt with the chair's mysteries before, though each case is unique." Mortimer felt a glimmer of hope. "Will they help me?" "They will certainly try. But you must be prepared, Mortimer. This journey will not be easy, nor without danger." The council convened that evening. The room was filled with an electric anticipation. At the head of a long wooden table sat 3 individuals, known to be the most powerful seers in Cassadaga. Eleanor sat among them. Mortimer, standing at the opposite end, felt like a specimen under scrutiny. He recounted his experiences, the dreams, visions, the pull of the chair, to the council. Each member listened intently, occasionally whispering amongst themselves. Finally, the eldest, a man with a long white beard and intense green eyes, spoke. "This is unlike any possession we've seen. The chair usually takes, it doesn't give. Whatever is inside you, it's something the chair deemed valuable." Mortimer gulped, feeling more like a pawn in a larger game. "So, how do I remove it?" The second council member, a woman with raven black hair, responded, "It's tethered to you through a bond. To break it, you'll have to sever the connection." "And how do we do that?" Eleanor interjected. The third member, a younger man with sharp features, leaned forward. "There's a ritual. But it's risky. It requires Mortimer to confront whatever is inside him. There's a chance he might lose himself in the process." Eleanor looked troubled. "There must be another way." The elder shook his head. "This is our best chance. The longer the entity remains, the harder it'll be to extract." Mortimer, overwhelmed, felt a rush of anger. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted answers to my visions." Eleanor reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We will help you, Mortimer. But you must be brave. The battle ahead is as much yours as it is ours." Preparations began immediately. The council's chamber was cleared, and a large pentagram was drawn in the center. Candles were placed at each point, their flames flickering in the dim light. Mortimer, seated at the center, felt the weight of the task ahead. The council, along with Eleanor, formed a protective circle around him. The ritual began with ancient incantations, their words heavy with power. The room grew cold, and a dense fog seemed to seep in from nowhere. Mortimer felt the entity stir within him. It resisted, fighting the pull of the council's chants. The struggle was intense. Mortimer's body convulsed, his screams echoing in the chamber. Hours seemed to pass. The entity, growing weaker, began to emerge, a dark, shadowy figure, its form constantly shifting, its eyes burning with malice. The council intensified their efforts, their combined energies pushing the entity towards the center of the pentagram. With one final, deafening roar, the entity was expelled, trapped within the confines of the pentagram. The room returned to normal, the oppressive cold lifting. Mortimer, exhausted, collapsed to the floor. Eleanor rushed to his side, relief evident on her face. "It's done," she whispered. The council, visibly drained, nodded in agreement. The entity, though trapped, still writhed within the pentagram, its fury palpable. "We'll contain it," the elder promised. "Ensure it can't harm anyone else." Mortimer, though freed, knew his journey was far from over. The chair's mysteries remained, but for now, he was safe. As dawn broke, Cassadaga seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Birds sang, and the warmth of the sun felt more pronounced than ever. But the devil's chair, ever silent, ever watchful, waited for its next visitor. Chapter 4. Whispers of the past. With the entity's expulsion, Cassadaga seemed to breathe easier. Mortimer's convalescence took place in Eleanor's spacious, yet oddly timeless home. The air smelled of old books and dried herbs, every room echoing with stories of yesteryears. One morning, over a breakfast of herbal tea and freshly baked bread, Eleanor looked pensive. "Mortimer," she began, "you've experienced the sinister allure of the devil's chair firsthand. But have you ever wondered about its origin?" He took a sip from his tea, feeling the warmth flow through him. "I've heard tales, but nothing concrete. It seems every person has a different story to tell." She nodded. "True. Legends vary, but I believe there's a grain of truth in all of them. To truly free yourself from the chair's clutches, it's essential to understand its history." Mortimer leaned forward, intrigued. "Do you know the real story?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then, retrieving an old leather-bound book from her shelf, she began. "Centuries ago, Cassadaga was a haven for psychics and mediums, much like today. However, there was a sect of powerful sorcerers who believed in harnessing darker energies. One such sorcerer, Aleister Crowley, not related to the more famous figure you might be thinking of, dreamt of creating a portal to the other realm. Using forbidden rituals and dark magic, he built the devil's chair as a conduit." Mortimer shivered, remembering his chilling encounter. Why would anyone want such a thing? She sighed. Power, knowledge, dominion over the seen and unseen worlds. But once the chair was completed, Crowley found he couldn't control the entity he had summoned. It devoured him, leaving behind only the stone relic. But the chair, it's just a piece of rock. How does it contain such energy? Eleanor closed the book, her eyes distant. Some say the chair holds Crowley's vengeful spirit, others believe it's an ancient demon he summoned. But everyone agrees on one thing: the chair is alive, thirsty for power. The weight of her words hung heavily in the room. Mortimer felt an overwhelming urge to leave Cassadaga, to put miles and memories between him and the accursed chair. Eleanor, sensing his distress, reached out to him. "I understand your fear. But running won't protect you. Remember, the chair reached out to you across states, drawing you here." A bitter realization dawned upon Mortimer. "So, what should I do?" Eleanor's gaze was unwavering. "Confront your past. Discover why you were chosen. Your family's history, perhaps there's a connection to Aleister Crowley or another from that era." Mortimer's mind raced. He remembered a dusty old family tree in his grandmother's attic back in Salem. She used to speak of ancestors with gifts. Could there be a link? Seeing his resolve, Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Research your lineage, uncover any secrets that might give us a clue. Meanwhile, I'll delve deeper into our town's archives. Together, we'll unravel this mystery." Mortimer's journey led him back to Salem, to his ancestral home. The mansion, although grand, wore a cloak of neglect. Ivy-covered walls, creaky floorboards, and portraits of stern-looking ancestors lined the hallways. In the attic, covered in layers of dust, was the family tree his grandmother once showed him. Tracing his lineage, he found an interesting detail. 4 generations back, there was a woman, Isabella Crowley, who had mysteriously disappeared in her 20s. Could she be related to Aleister Crowley of Cassadaga? His search led him to old letters and diaries. Late into the night, under the dim light of an old lamp, Mortimer discovered something chilling. Isabella, in her letters, spoke of a forbidden love affair with a man from Cassadaga, a powerful sorcerer named Aleister. They had dreamt of melding the dark with the light, merging 2 powerful lineages. But their love was forbidden, their practices deemed too dangerous. In her final letter, Isabella wrote of being pregnant, carrying a child that would bear the weight of both light and dark legacies. However, before she could give birth, she vanished. Mortimer, piecing together the jigsaw, realized the horrifying truth. Isabella was his great-great-grandmother. The baby she spoke of was his own ancestor. The dark legacy of Aleister Crowley ran in his veins. Armed with this knowledge, he returned to Cassadaga. Eleanor, too, had made a startling discovery. The chair was incomplete. Aleister's final ritual, which would have amplified its power tenfold, was never conducted because of his sudden demise. "So, what does this mean for me?" Mortimer questioned. Eleanor looked grave. "It means the chair might come for you again. To complete the ritual, it needs a descendant of Aleister, someone with his blood." Mortimer felt like a pawn in a macabre game. "We need to destroy the chair." Eleanor shook her head. "It's not that simple. Destroying the chair might unleash whatever it's holding back. We need a plan, a way to neutralize its power." The realization that he was bound to the chair by blood, by fate, weighed heavily on Mortimer. But he was not alone. With Eleanor by his side and the knowledge of his lineage, he was determined to end the curse of the devil's chair, whatever the cost. Chapter 5. The Sorcerer's Diary. In the heart of Cassadaga, a misty dawn broke, tinging the town with eerie hues of gray and lavender. Mortimer's days in town, albeit filled with grim discoveries, had also been a period of rapid learning. Eleanor, with her vast knowledge of the paranormal, was his mentor, guide, and ally. They decided to visit the local library, a repository of ancient texts, records, and personal diaries, hoping to find more about Aleister Crowley and the rituals he practiced. Eleanor believed that among the dusty manuscripts and moth-eaten tomes, they might find clues on how to neutralize the devil's chair. The librarian, a gaunt woman with spectacles resting precariously on her nose, pointed them towards the restricted section, a corner of the library seldom visited. With a heavy iron key, she unlocked the gates, cautioning them to handle the materials with care. Hours passed, the only sound being the rustle of old pages turning and the occasional caw of a raven outside. Just as Mortimer's patience was thinning, his fingers brushed a leather-bound diary embossed with a curious symbol, a chair encased within a pentagon. The diary belonged to Aleister Crowley. Hurriedly, he beckoned Eleanor. Together, they pored over the pages, deciphering the scrawls of the long-dead sorcerer. Aleister wrote of his dreams to bridge the realm of the living with that of the supernatural. He spoke of a cosmic alignment that occurred once every century, a time when the veil between worlds thinned, making his dark rituals even more potent. Eleanor's fingers traced the dates, her face ashen. Mortimer, the next alignment, it's tonight. A cold shiver ran down Mortimer's spine. If the Devil's Chair sought to complete its ritual using his bloodline, tonight would be the opportune moment. Continuing their reading, they stumbled upon Aleister's last entry. It detailed the final ritual for the chair. A blend of ancient spells, it was designed to infuse the chair with immense power. But there was a caveat. The ritual, if interrupted, could bind the performer's spirit to the chair forever. Eleanor looked at Mortimer, realization dawning. That's what must have happened to Aleister. When he failed, his spirit became imprisoned within the chair. And now, the entity seeks to complete what Aleister started using you. The urgency of their situation was palpable. Armed with this newfound knowledge, they needed a plan. Returning to Eleanor's house, they laid out the contents of Aleister's ritual, a mix of obscure ingredients, chance, and precise timings. Mortimer's face was grim. If we're to neutralize the chair, we need to use this ritual against it. Turn its own power inwards. Eleanor nodded. But it's risky. We'll be treading a path no one has before. The slightest mistake can be catastrophic. The evening sky turned a dark shade of crimson. Time was of the essence. They gathered the ingredients: nightshade, mandrake root, a raven's feather, and Mortimer's own blood. A drop would suffice. As night deepened, they approached the cemetery, the silhouette of the Devil's Chair looming menacingly in the moonlight. The ambiance was thick with anticipation. In the distance, the howl of a lone wolf echoed, sending a shudder through the very earth. Positioning themselves around the chair, they began the ritual. Eleanor's voice, strong and clear, chanted verses in an ancient tongue. Mortimer, focusing all his psychic energy, acted as the anchor, ensuring the dark power remained confined. The chair began to tremble, a low hum emanating from it. The ground shook, and a vortex of wind whipped around them, threatening to disrupt their concentration. As Eleanor reached the climax of the ritual, Mortimer felt an overwhelming force trying to penetrate his defenses. With a final, resounding chant, Eleanor thrust the raven's feather into the chair. A blinding light enveloped the area, and an ear-piercing scream echoed, fading into an unsettling silence. As the dust settled, the chair stood still, its once ominous aura now diminished. Eleanor, exhausted but unharmed, turned to Mortimer. He lay on the ground, drained but alive. The Devil's Chair had been neutralized. The entity, along with Aleister's vengeful spirit, had been bound and sealed within. Returning to the town, the duo was greeted as heroes. The curse that had long haunted Cassadaga was lifted. Celebrations ensued, but Mortimer, although relieved, felt a void. A week later, bidding Eleanor and Cassadaga goodbye, he returned to Salem, determined to research more about his lineage and the powers that ran in his blood. But Cassadaga remained a beacon, a testament to his journey, a place where he confronted his past, faced unspeakable evil, and emerged victorious. The story of Mortimer, the psychic from Salem, and the Devil's Chair would be told in hushed tones for generations to come. Chapter 6. Echoes from the Abyss. Eleanor had warned Mortimer that sealing away such dark forces might have consequences. As weeks turned into months, Mortimer, back in Salem, began experiencing disturbing visions and nightmares. The realm of sleep, which should have been a refuge, became a prison of tormented souls and darkened landscapes. One particularly terrifying night, Mortimer found himself in a grotesque version of Cassadaga. The streets were lined with shadowy figures, faces obscured, whispering unintelligible words. The Devil's Chair, supposed to have been neutralized, stood at the center of the town square, pulsating with a sickly glow. From its depths, a voice called out, "You may have bound me, but you cannot silence the echoes I've left behind." Mortimer woke up drenched in sweat. It was just a dream, he reassured himself. However, the feeling of unease clung to him like a second skin. He decided to visit the Salem Witch Museum, hoping to find solace or understanding among the artifacts and remnants of his town's supernatural history. The museum, with its dim lighting and centuries-old relics, always had an eerie ambiance. As Mortimer wandered through the exhibits, an old painting caught his attention. It depicted a scene eerily similar to his dream: shadowy figures gathered around a glowing chair. The plaque below read, "The Whisperer's Ritual, 1692. Curiosity piqued, Mortimer approached the museum's curator, an elderly man named Gilbert, known for his vast knowledge of Salem's occult past. After narrating his dream and the recent events in Cassadaga, Gilbert's face turned pale. "Young man," Gilbert began, his voice quivering, "the Whisperer's Ritual isn't just a myth. It's a ceremony where dark entities are invoked to whisper the future. But there's always a price. The echoes of their whispers often bind to a soul, usually the one who's disrupted their plans." Mortimer's heart raced. "Are you saying these echoes have bound themselves to me?" Gilbert nodded gravely. The chair in Cassadaga might have been linked to the one from the Whisperer's Ritual. By disrupting its intent, you might have unknowingly bound these echoes to yourself. The implications were terrifying. Mortimer's visions weren't mere dreams. They were whispers from entities of the abyss, seeking to drive him to madness or worse. Seeing Mortimer's distress, Gilbert suggested a solution. "There's a ritual to release these echoes. But it requires you to confront them directly, to face your fears head-on." With little choice, Mortimer agreed. Under Gilbert's guidance, a circle was drawn in the museum's basement, surrounded by candles, crystals, and incantations written in an archaic script. As the ritual commenced, the temperature dropped. Shadows danced menacingly on the walls, and an oppressive silence filled the room. Guided by Gilbert's steady voice, Mortimer closed his eyes and let himself drift into the abyss of his subconscious. The grotesque Cassadaga from his dream materialized around him. The whispering shadows grew louder, their voices a cacophony of despair and anger. Focusing on his inner strength and the knowledge he'd gained, Mortimer approached the pulsating chair, its glow now blinding. Drawing a deep breath, he shouted, "I reject your whispers, your echoes, your torment. Release me." A hurricane of voices and emotions swirled around him, threatening to tear his very soul apart. But Mortimer stood firm, his voice a beacon of defiance against the darkness. And then, suddenly, silence. The dream Cassadaga faded, replaced by the museum's basement. The circle remained intact, the candles still burning. Gilbert, looking aged and tired, met Mortimer's gaze with a relieved smile. "You've done it. The echoes are gone." Mortimer, though exhausted, felt an immense weight lifted off him. The oppressive grip of the whisperers, the haunting visions, were no more. Gilbert, placing a hand on Mortimer's shoulder, spoke, "Remember, confronting our fears is the most potent magic of all. But also, remember that meddling with the unknown often has a price. Mortimer nodded, the lessons of Cassadaga and now Salem deeply ingrained in him. As he left the museum, the early morning sun painted the horizon with hues of gold and orange. A new day, a new beginning. Yet, deep within, Mortimer knew his dance with the supernatural was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready. And as the dawn broke over Salem, the town of witches and shadows, Mortimer, its reluctant hero, prepared for the next chapter of his uncanny journey. Chapter 7. The Seance of Shadows. Cassadaga had its secrets, and Salem had its shadows, but both places paled in comparison to the foreboding history of New Orleans. Word spread quickly in the paranormal community about Mortimer's encounters and his recent triumph over the echoes of the abyss. As the tales grew in grandeur, so did the attention they garnered. One evening, a delicate letter, sealed with a wax emblem of a crow perched atop a skull, arrived at Mortimer's home in Salem. The handwriting was ornate, almost ancient in its styling. "Dearest Mortimer, I've heard of your recent triumphs over the shadows and whispers that sought to claim you. Your reputation, it seems, has traveled even to the bayous of Louisiana. There's a matter of grave importance that requires your unique expertise. Come to the heart of New Orleans, to the Maison des Ombres. I'll be waiting. Madame Delphine Laveau." Madame Laveau? The name sounded hauntingly familiar to Mortimer. A quick visit to Gilbert for insight revealed a chilling fact. Madame Delphine Laveau was said to be a distant relative of the infamous voodoo queen, Marie Laveau. However, Delphine was rumored to have dabbled not in the healing arts of voodoo but in its darker counterpart, hoodoo. Gilbert's warning was clear. Be wary, Mortimer. New Orleans is a city of magic, music, and mayhem. But above all, it's a city of secrets. Upon his arrival in New Orleans, the rich tapestry of culture immediately enveloped Mortimer. The soulful melodies of jazz, the intoxicating aroma of Creole cuisine, and the enigmatic allure of the French Quarter all beckoned him. Yet, his destination was not among the bustling streets but in a secluded alley where the Maison des Ombres awaited. The mansion was grandiose, yet time and humidity had taken their toll. Its walls whispered of old tales and older spirits. At the entrance, Mortimer was greeted by a woman who exuded a timeless beauty, her dark eyes brimming with mystery and a hint of melancholy. "Madame Laveau?" Mortimer inquired. In flesh and spirit, she responded, her voice sultry but carrying a weight of sadness. She guided him into a vast chamber where a grand table was set, surrounded by 13 ornate chairs. At the center, a crystal ball glowed with a luminescent light. Mortimer soon learned the gravity of his summons. The spirits of New Orleans, usually harmonious, were now in disarray. Souls that once rested were now restless. Madame Laveau believed an ancient ritual was being reawakened, one that could plunge New Orleans into eternal darkness. "The Seance of Shadows," she whispered, her eyes distant as if recalling a long-forgotten nightmare. Conducted once every century, it harnesses the power of the lost souls to bestow immense power upon the summoner. But its cost is immeasurable, casting shadows over the city, allowing darkness to reign. Madame Laveau sought Mortimer's aid in preventing the ritual. With his psychic abilities and his recent victories over the supernatural, she believed he was the key to averting the impending catastrophe. That night, surrounded by hooded figures, each representing a different voodoo loa, the seance commenced. The room grew cold, the air thick with tension. Mortimer's psychic senses were overwhelmed by the cries and pleas of countless spirits. As the hours ticked by, the crystal ball showcased disturbing visions, streets of New Orleans submerged in shadows, souls wandering lost, and, most chillingly, a shadowy figure standing atop the city's cathedral, casting darkness as far as the eye could see. Mortimer realized the summoner wasn't merely harnessing the power of the lost souls. He was trapping them, using them as fuel for his dark ambitions. Drawing upon all his strength and experiences, Mortimer sought to communicate with the spirits, to guide them away from the trap. But the summoner's pull was strong, threatening to ensnare even Mortimer in its grasp. As the battle of wills intensified, Madame Laveau began chanting an old Creole lullaby, its notes mournful yet hopeful. The song, a tribute to lost souls, became a beacon, guiding them towards peace and away from the summoner's grasp. Hours felt like moments and moments like an eternity. But as dawn approached, the room's tension began to wane. The shadowy figure in the crystal ball, once triumphant, now seemed to disintegrate, the trapped souls breaking free from his hold. Exhausted, Mortimer and Madame Laveau, along with the hooded representatives, had prevented the seance of shadows from reaching its malevolent climax. New Orleans was safe, at least for another century. As Mortimer prepared to depart the city, Madame Laveau offered a parting gift, a small talisman, a protective charm. "For the battles you've faced and those yet to come," she said, her voice filled with gratitude and a hint of prophecy. New Orleans remained a city of magic and music, but Mortimer left with a deeper understanding of its mysteries and the shadows that lurked just beneath the surface. Another chapter in his paranormal journey had ended, but the book was far from Chapter 8. The chalice of desolation rain pounded hard on the window panes as Mortimer returned to Salem, the rhythmic beat echoing the foreboding drumbeats of New Orleans. The talisman from Madame Laveau hung heavy around his neck, its cool touch a constant reminder of the battles he'd faced and those still looming on the horizon. No sooner had he settled into his old home than a sharp knock echoed through the hallway. Opening the door, Mortimer found himself face to face with a young woman, her azure eyes filled with desperation and urgency. "Mr. Mortimer?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Recognizing the signature marks of someone who had seen the supernatural, he beckoned her inside, offering solace from the storm. The woman introduced herself as Eleanor and with a hesitant voice began recounting her tale. Eleanor had been an apprentice at a nearby apothecary. One evening, as she shelved a recently acquired collection of antiques, she stumbled upon an ancient chalice. Its craftsmanship was unparalleled, with intricate carvings and a luminous sheen that seemed to radiate darkness. Though it bore no inscriptions, it pulsated with an energy that felt alive. Since its discovery, Eleanor began experiencing night terrors, visions of hooded figures in a vast cathedral, chanting in an unknown tongue. The central figure, his face obscured by shadows, would raise the chalice high, each time heralding some great catastrophe in the waking world. Unable to bear the nightmares any longer, Eleanor sought out Mortimer, having heard of his reputation in dealing with the occult. She handed him a drawing she had made of the chalice, hoping he could shed light on its origin and purpose. Mortimer's eyes narrowed as he studied the drawing, recognition dawning. The chalice matched the description of the Chalice of Desolation, a cursed artifact said to be forged in the fires of hell. Legend spoke of its power to channel the energies of the underworld, granting its possessor unparalleled power at a terrible price. Determined to prevent any further calamity, Mortimer and Eleanor set out to find the chalice. Their search led them to an underground auction of forbidden artifacts, hidden deep beneath Salem's cobblestone streets. Disguised as interested buyers, they entered the dimly lit chamber, its walls lined with objects of dark significance. As the auctioneer presented item after item, the tension grew palpable. Finally, with a flourish, he revealed the chalice, its eerie glow captivating the room. Bidding was fierce, with amounts reaching dizzying heights. But Mortimer was undeterred. Using his psychic abilities, he subtly influenced the room, ensuring their bid remained the highest. As the gavel struck, declaring them the winners, he felt an overwhelming rush of darkness emanate from the chalice. Whispers began to fill the room as the attendees recognized him. "It's Mortimer, the one who defeated the Devil's Chair," they murmured. Eyes filled with greed and envy turned their attention to him, sensing the power he now possessed. The pair made a hasty exit, but not before being approached by a hooded figure. "Beware," he hissed, his voice dripping with menace. "The chalice does not take kindly to being possessed." The journey back was treacherous. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, watching their every move. Eleanor clutched the chalice close, its cold metal seeming to seep into her very soul. Arriving at Mortimer's residence, they were met by Gilbert, who had been researching ways to neutralize the chalice's power. "Legend speaks of a ritual," he began, "performed under the new moon. It requires 3 ingredients: the blood of one who has faced the supernatural, the ash of a tree struck by lightning, and the tear of a banshee." Gathering the ingredients was no easy feat. The trio faced specters from their past, each challenge testing their resolve. But with Mortimer's guidance and Eleanor's newfound courage, they persevered. The night of the new moon arrived, the world bathed in an eerie darkness. In the heart of a forest clearing, they began the ritual. As Mortimer chanted ancient verses, the chalice seemed to come alive, its glow intensifying. Shadows danced around them, their haunting cries filling the night. Eleanor, her connection with the chalice growing stronger, began to waver. Her eyes, once filled with determination, now showed signs of possession. Sensing her struggle, Mortimer intensified his efforts, the very air around them crackling with energy. With a final, deafening cry, a blinding light engulfed the clearing. When it subsided, the chalice lay dormant, its power contained. Eleanor, though drained, was free from its influence. The trio returned to Salem, the chalice now safely locked away. But as Mortimer gazed out into the night, he couldn't help but wonder, how many more artifacts of darkness were out there? And would he be ready to face them? As dawn broke, a new chapter awaited, filled with mysteries yet to be unveiled and darkness yet to be challenged. Chapter 9. Whispers from Cassadaga. Mortimer, Eleanor, and Gilbert sat at the kitchen table in Mortimer's Salem home, the remnants of their ritual still fresh in their minds. The air was thick with tension, the weight of what they had experienced pressing down on them. The chalice was safely tucked away, but the shadows it had cast lingered. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed midnight, its deep tones cutting through the silence. Suddenly, a gust of wind howled outside, causing the candle flames to flicker erratically. It was then that they heard it, a soft, distant whisper, barely audible yet chilling to the bone. "I see you." Mortimer's eyes widened. That voice. It was unmistakably the same eerie whisper that had haunted his dreams after his first encounter with the Devil's Chair in Cassadaga. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, pulling him back to the cursed town he had once hoped to forget. Eleanor, sensing his distress, reached for his hand. "Mortimer, what is it?" Before he could answer, a series of images flashed through his mind, a dilapidated mansion, the moon casting an otherworldly glow on Cassadaga's spiritualist camp, and at the heart of it all, the Devil's Chair, pulsating with dark energy. He rose abruptly from his seat, his gaze distant. "The Devil's Chair. It's calling to me again. It's not over." Gilbert frowned, concern evident in his eyes. "But we contained its power, didn't we?" Mortimer shook his head slowly. The chalice was but a piece of the puzzle. There's something else, something darker at play in Cassadaga. And I fear we've only scratched the surface. The group quickly made preparations for their journey to Cassadaga. The path ahead was uncertain, but Mortimer's psychic connection to the town was undeniable. They would need all the help they could get. As they approached Cassadaga, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over them. The town seemed different, more sinister, its shadows deeper, its secrets better hidden. But Mortimer was undeterred. His connection to the Devil's Chair grew stronger with each passing moment, guiding him towards the heart of the spiritualist camp. There, they found the once vibrant community eerily deserted, its residents nowhere to be seen. The only sign of life was a faint, flickering light emanating from the window of a grand mansion, its architecture a stark contrast to the rest of the camp. Drawn to it, Mortimer cautiously approached the mansion, the others close behind. Inside, they were met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. The mansion's grand hall was filled with the residents of Cassadaga, each of them entranced, their eyes vacant, chanting in unison to the rhythm of a slow, haunting drumbeat. At the center of the room stood the Devil's Chair, its dark presence more powerful than ever. And seated upon it was a figure Mortimer recognized all too well, a twisted version of himself, his eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The doppelganger spoke, his voice dripping with venom. "Ah, Mortimer, we meet again. Did you really think you could escape the pull of the chair? It has chosen you, and now you will join us." As he spoke, the chanting grew louder, the room's energy intensifying. Eleanor and Gilbert were quickly caught in its spell, their wills bending to the will of the chair. Desperation gripped Mortimer. He had faced the chair once before and survived, but this time was different. This time, the stakes were higher, the enemy more powerful. But he was not one to back down. Drawing on the knowledge he had gained from Madame Laveau, Mortimer began chanting a counterspell, attempting to break the chair's hold on the room. The doppelganger laughed, his confidence unshaken, but Mortimer pressed on, his voice rising in strength and determination. The room's energy shifted, the balance of power teetering on a knife's edge. With a final, deafening roar, Mortimer unleashed a torrent of psychic energy, targeting the very core of the chair's power. The explosion that followed was blinding, the mansion's walls shaking from the force. When the dust settled, the Devil's Chair was gone, reduced to ashes. The doppelganger, too, had vanished, leaving behind only the faintest trace of his malevolent presence. Eleanor and Gilbert, now free from the chair's influence, rushed to Mortimer's side, gratitude and relief evident in their eyes. The residents of Cassadaga, too, began to stir, their memories of the ordeal hazy at best. As the trio left the ruins of the mansion behind, the weight of their ordeal lifted. Cassadaga, once a place of darkness and despair, was now bathed in the soft glow of dawn, its future uncertain but filled with hope. But as they made their way back to Salem, Mortimer couldn't help but wonder, had they truly defeated the Devil's Chair, or was this just the beginning of a much larger battle? Only time would tell. Chapter 10. The unearthed secrets. The Salem homestead seemed eerily quiet after the tumultuous events in Cassadaga. Mortimer's house, once a haven for the tormented psychic, now seemed tainted, its corridors echoing with half-heard whispers and unseen movements from the corner of his eyes. Still reeling from the recent ordeals, he found solace in the old books and manuscripts in his study, desperate for answers that eluded him. One evening, Eleanor came across an old leather-bound journal tucked away in an alcove of the house, dusty and untouched for years. The journal belonged to Mortimer's great-grandfather, who, as family lore went, had dabbled in the esoteric arts. Flipping through its pages, Eleanor's finger traced the handwritten notes, cryptic symbols, and detailed diagrams. An entry dated October 13, 1888, caught her eye. "Tonight, I stumbled upon a revelation. The chair isn't just an object. It's a conduit, a portal between the realm of the living and the nether. But it's not the only one. There are 13 such artifacts, scattered throughout the world, all pulsating with the same dark energy. I've come into possession of one, the cursed chalice. If these artifacts are ever united, the balance between our world and the next could be forever shattered. Eleanor's heart raced as she read on. My attempts to destroy the chalice have been in vain. The only solution is to hide it, keep it far away from the others. I pray my descendants heed this warning and never seek out the remaining artifacts. The cost is too great, the danger too imminent. She quickly relayed her discovery to Mortimer and Gilbert. Their prior endeavors with the chalice and the devil's chair now made haunting sense. They were never meant to be together, Mortimer whispered, realization dawning. By uniting even two of the artifacts, we inadvertently amplified their power. Gilbert frowned. So, what do we do now? Find the other artifacts? We must, Mortimer declared. Before someone else does and harnesses their combined might for malevolent purposes. The trio wasted no time. Using Mortimer's psychic abilities and the journal as a guide, they embarked on a perilous journey, seeking the other 11 artifacts. Each location brought with it unique challenges: cursed tombs in Egypt, haunted forests in Romania, and forbidden temples in the Himalayas. As their quest progressed, it became clear they were not alone in this pursuit. An ominous shadow seemed to trail them, always one step behind. It was during their expedition in an abandoned cathedral in France that they had their first encounter with this enigmatic adversary, a cult that called themselves the Guardians of the Nether. Clad in crimson robes, with faces obscured by masks, the cultists attacked with a ferocity fueled by blind faith. Led by a high priestess with eyes that glowed an unnatural shade of green, they sought the artifacts to plunge the world into eternal darkness. One harrowing confrontation followed another. From the catacombs beneath Paris to the rainforests of South America, Mortimer, Eleanor, and Gilbert fought valiantly against the cult's relentless onslaught. In the dense jungles of the Amazon, they found the 12th artifact, a sinister obsidian mirror, rumored to show not one's reflection, but their darkest fears. But the discovery came at a great cost. Gilbert was grievously wounded during a skirmish with the cult, forcing them to halt their expedition temporarily. With Gilbert's life hanging in the balance, Eleanor and Mortimer faced their toughest challenge yet. Mortimer's psychic visions became increasingly chaotic, intertwined with haunting memories of Cassadaga and the Devil's Chair. The High Priestess reached out to Mortimer in his dreams, her voice dripping with malevolence. Your resistance is futile, seer. The Nether will rise, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. As dawn broke, Mortimer's determination solidified. They would find the 13th artifact, prevent the cult from achieving their dark goals, and save Gilbert. The final clue led them to a desolate island off the coast of Scotland, home to ancient druidic ruins. As they approached, an unsettling feeling washed over them, the weight of centuries of rituals and secrets pressing down. Hidden beneath a stone altar, they found the last artifact, a dagger with a blade forged from moonlight and shadows. But their triumph was short-lived. The High Priestess and her cultists had caught up to them, surrounding them in a deadly circle. The ensuing battle was fierce and desperate. Mortimer, wielding the power of all 13 artifacts, stood against the High Priestess, their energies clashing in a cataclysmic confrontation. The island trembled, the very fabric of reality threatening to tear apart. With a final, desperate act, Mortimer used the dagger to shatter the obsidian mirror, severing the connection between the artifacts and the Nether. A blinding explosion rocked the island. When the dust settled, the Guardians of the Nether were gone, their threat neutralized. But the victory came at a great personal cost for Mortimer. Eleanor found him near the ruins, the artifacts scattered around him, their dark energy dissipated. Mortimer's psychic connection had been severed, the burden of the visions lifted. With Gilbert slowly recovering and the world safe once more, the trio returned to Salem. The artifacts were hidden, their locations known only to Mortimer, Eleanor, and Gilbert. But as they settled back into their lives, one question lingered in the shadows. Was the threat truly over, or had they merely delayed the inevitable? The winds of Cassadaga whispered tales of future challenges, of darkness waiting to rise again. And Mortimer knew, deep down, that their battles were far from over. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.